welcome. We have Charlie Cowan, the author of How to Sell Tech. So, Charlie, William Shakespeare, Thomas Hardy, Virginia Woolf, that Harry Potter lady. What is it with English people and writing books?
We just love to write. We love to write. It's been a really interesting exercise over the last year or so. I started this about 9 months ago, and actually, it was off the back of reading two good books. I don't know if you've read a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It was like an Amazon bestseller last year. Which is really good. And it's just about how to get good at doing really good habits and how to get rid of bad habits. And, the premise of it is pretty simple. It's, forget looking at the outcome and look at the actual activity. So if you think of, trying to get fit, for example, like lots of people will come into January and go, right, this year I'm going to get fit. But after a couple of weeks, you sort of, forget and you move on to something else. But if you say, right, every lunchtime at 12 o'clock, I'm going to shut my laptop and I'm going to go for a 5K run. And you commit to doing that every day at 12 o'clock. Then after a few months, you'll have got pretty fit. So it's about focusing on that. And so I read that book. And then straight after that book, I read another book called Write Useful Books. And just as the name suggests, it's about how do you write what he calls recommendable fiction and nonfiction. So how do you write something that when someone's read it, they tell other people in exactly the same way that I'm telling you about Write Useful Books. Like, this is a really useful book. There's the combination of those two back to back. So the habit of doing something, every day, and then the process of how to write a useful book. I started off what I call a power hour at 7 o'clock every morning. So because of COVID, didn't have to go to an office, was not sat on a train. I had time when the kids were headed off to school with my wife every morning before I needed to start work. So for 9 months, every day, weekends included, I wrote for 1 hour. And you start off, this was through sort of July, August, September, and you just got like reams of Google Docs, and you don't really know where you're going. You're just throwing stuff down on the page.
Right.
And then I think I got to like December, and I was like, I think I've written a book. Actually, when I started to piece all this stuff together, I think I've written a book. And then, through January through to now has been a process of beta reading, getting it out to various people, getting it edited, and really following the process that's laid out in this Write Useful Books. And that brings us to, last week, which is publishing day. And then there it is, a book on how to sell.
Amazing. So it is kind of, you proved out the building good habits can produce results and not having lofty goals. So tell us a little bit about your origin story of how you got into the cloud world. And was that your dream growing up?
It was not. So, I mean, I grew up on a farm, and I would spend my holidays working out in the lambing sheds, and I used to read books. James Herriot is a famous sort of vet here in the UK, and so lots of his books. And so my aspiration was to go and be a vet. And in fact, I got a place at veterinary school. Although, side note, I didn't find out about that until 10 years later when my dad told me and said, I didn't think you really wanted to be a vet, so I didn't tell you. But that's separate. But what I did end up doing is going to agricultural college, which I very much enjoyed. But as I was coming to the end of agricultural college, I was like, what on earth am I going to do? I really haven't got any idea. And I used to work in a local pub that was a couple of miles outside of the university town. And to get from uni to that pub, I used to go through a little industrial estate, and there was an office on that industrial estate, kind of nondescript, blacked out windows, company name board, same as any other company. but the car park around the back was stacked with really cool cars. There was like a Lamborghini Diablo, there was a Ferrari 355, there was a Bentley. I was like, what on earth goes on in this this company? Because we were in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't like San Francisco.
Right.
So I knocked on the door, and the receptionist buzzed me in, and I said, like, what on earth do you do here? And she was like, we are a business only ISP. I was like, I've got absolutely no idea what that means, but can I have a job? And so she, passed my details on to a guy called Johnny, who was the sales director. And then I was asked to come in for an interview. And met him. The only thing I can remember from that is him saying, why do you want to come and work in sales? And I said, because I want a really big television. And that was that interview. And then luckily I was invited back to come to kind of a sort of mass interview that they were doing in the training room. So about 30 candidates came in at one evening, and the sort of sales trainer was there, like handing out pipe cleaners. Sell me this pipe cleaner. And so I managed to sort of get through that process. Talked a little bit, got my head above the parapet, and then came into a third interview, which was the worst interview that I've ever experienced or heard of, where I was, I don't say attacked, but this guy went absolutely mad on me. He was like, get out, come in and interview me. I was like, what? Okay. Well, why do you want the job? I don't. Okay, I'm confused now. So that was a very bizarre experience. But after that, I was given this job, and I turned up a couple of days after my finals finished at uni for my first sort of SMB sales role, and sat down on my desk with a desktop computer, as was in those days, Goldmine, which was the CRM system of the day.
I remember.
And and a desk phone, and it was like, right, let's go. And I remember my first manager was a guy called Paul, and he said, so where have you worked in sales before? And I was like, I worked in the pub. I've sold people a beer and a garlic bread, but that's about it. And to be fair, he really took me under his wing, and I spent the first few weeks just calling him across the office, calling him hanging up again. And when it came to writing this book, that scene is exactly what I had in my mind. There I was starting off. I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to be doing or how to do it, other than I was supposed to get people to say yes and to buy stuff, but I didn't have any system. I didn't have any process. So, in writing this book was, okay, across tech companies, Salesforce, Microsoft, wherever they might be, services companies, SaaS companies, there are hundreds of thousands of mini Charlies that are straight out of college trying to work out, what do I do for a living? What is this job? How do I speak to people? How do I, help move them along a process? And that's really what I've written it for.
That's really interesting. Selling beer in a pub has to be the easiest sales job in the world, if only. So one question I have for you is, my father was in sales. He sold foundry equipment. So it was very Midwest America industrial. He had a very large personality, kind of like a game show host. So it's one thing I've always wondered almost my whole life is, how much of a sales professional's job are they born with it because they have a certain personality, and how much of it is something that, like a skill that you acquire?
So I think the natural assumption is that salespeople have this sort of born skill. They're outgoing. They are extrovert. They like to schmooze people, and they like to wear a thick tie and a pinstripe suit, and like, oh, that's the salesperson. And I'm 100% not that.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm very introverted. You know, lockdown put me in my own house for 2 years, and I'm a happy bunny. You know, that's that suits me down to the ground. Um, uh, but what you actually find is that, you know, what makes a great salesperson. So what customers want is someone that understands their situation, understands their business, can bring, you know, really useful insight and lead them in the right direction, and like shut up and listen.
Mhm.
And so that's not the extrovert person who's always pitching, who's always showing them some slides, who's always saying, I've got the answer. And so, you know, what I've certainly learned over this career is that actually, you know, introverts, quieter people, more analytical people make absolutely great salespeople. And I think, you know, if you'll remember our time at a Perio, some of the most successful salespeople came from the consulting ranks.
Mhm.
So they were technical architects, they were solution architects who were good at asking questions and solving the customer's problem. And if
Yeah.
you can solve the customer's problem better than anyone else, they'll buy from you. And so, you know, those can make very, you know, successful salespeople. Not to say that your traditional sort of salesperson, you know, can't be successful, but
Mhm.
they're not the only game in town.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I work with some of those salespeople still at Atrium. But on the back of your book, and I've not gotten to read it yet, um, there's one statement I think is kind of universal in business, one question, and that is how to manage meetings like a pro.
Mm.
Um, and that applies to everyone, whether you're in sales or not, usually, if you're in some kind of, especially computer business, technology. How do you manage meetings like a pro?
Mm. Well, so firstly, you know, when I was writing this book for these sort of first-time sellers, there's plenty of sales books out there who can tell you how to go from one end of a sales process to another. But there's very few that tell you about all of the softer skills that are in that job, like how to manage a meeting. Unless you go on some kind of continued professional development course on managing meetings, you might go 10 years without someone telling you how to do that.
Right.
So there's a few things that you know, I certainly think when I'm managing meetings. So number one, do we even need to have this meeting? You know, people's calendars are littered with pointless meetings, you know, recurring meetings, you know, updates, check-ins, you know, just an absolute waste of time. And the one thing that you've got as a salesperson that you have to protect religiously is your time. You've only got a certain number of hours in the week. And so sitting it in a pointless update meeting is a waste. So number one is to focus. A meeting should only happen if you can say, what problem are we trying to solve? You know, what is the problem? That we actually need to bring people together, either in a room or virtually. We need to solve X, and it's going to need a whiteboard, and it's going to need a flip chart, and it's going to need post-it notes, you know, and it's going to need a decision at the end of it.
Yeah.
That's a good reason for a meeting. Once you've then worked out that you actually need to have a meeting, whoever's creating it needs to have an agenda. And that
Right.
agenda is not just 4 bullet points in the invite. It actually needs ideally to be a Google Doc or something that's written down. And it is, this is the objective of the meeting. This is the problem we're trying to solve. These are the people that need to be in this meeting. None of this optional attendees. Like either
Right.
you're needed to solve the problem or you're not, in which case you don't need to come.
Right.
And then very specific, you know, the actual tasks that are going to get to solving that problem. So these are the task number 1, task number 2, task number 3. Who owns it? When are they going to start? What's the duration of that? So that you've got specific owners of that. Now that can seem a little bit over the top when you're doing a pitch to a customer, but my experience has been when you lay that agenda down in front of people, they go, okay, this is a proper meeting. Like
Yeah.
we're actually going to go through this agenda.
Right.
And I do actually print it out for my customer meetings. And that's useful for a couple of reasons. They know that the agenda is real and it's not just
Mhm.
like a gimmick. but it's got everyone's names on it. So even after your intro slide has gone, they can see who's in the meeting and everything. And then you can also use that if you've got someone that is just jabbering on, you can say, look, John, I'm going to move you on to the next item because we've got to stick to the agenda. So that's a really useful thing. And then I think there's a few other items, but the sort of the final one that I would say on meetings is just about following up and giving yourself time to follow up. So many salespeople are so busy that they never have time to do any work. So you go onto a meeting with a customer and you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. And then you go straight onto your next call and you never do those things. And a week later, you have another meeting with the customer and you go, I was going to send you this thing, wasn't I? I was going to send you that. Like, one of the main things that you can do as a salesperson is to inject urgency into your deals. And most of that urgency you can't control because it's linked to what the customer's doing in their business. The one thing that you can control as a salesperson is how quickly you do your bit of work. So I like to think of it as like a game of tennis. You know, you have a meeting and the customer knocks some actions over to you. You want to smash those actions straight back to them so it's back on their side of the net. And yet so many salespeople leave stuff on their side of the net for weeks, and then they wonder why their sale took 5 months longer to close. It's because you were dithering on booking a meeting or pulling a proposal together. So I actually have 1 hour every day blocked out over lunchtime, which just says block in my calendar, block. And I know that I've got that breathing space every lunch to do the stuff that happened in the morning, and get their stuff back over the net as quickly as possible.
That's really amazing advice. I can't tell you how many meeting invites I get with no agenda at all, right? And it's just it's a habit I try to get my teammates to get into, and it's a habit I try to follow, because in the morning you look at your calendar and you see an invite, an hour-long meeting with no agenda. It's like, what do I need to bring to this? Why am I going here? And then you get existential, like, why am I here at all? I've known you for a while. You've had a broad career. Selling professional services versus selling product is an internal, especially in the cloud world, is a eternal question. How are they different, and can people float in between those two different sales types?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, and I feel lucky to have worked on both sides. So I spent the first 10 years of my career selling SaaS cloud product, and then I spent 8 years on the consulting side, and then now I'm back in product. When I started on the services side, I was like, this is great. This is brilliant, because you're selling a vision, a dream, an idea. Like, this thing doesn't actually have to exist yet. So I can really help to, talk the customer through, how we're going to do it and everything. And so I felt for a short period of time that this was going to be a lot easier. And then, of course, as the first contracts got signed, I realized the secret, which is that the hard work starts after, because now we have to deliver on this thing.
Right.
And, there's no such thing as, signing the statement of work and then, run off and go and sell to the next customer. It's, oh no, we're in project launch workshops, we're in check-ins, we're in, the whole way through. And, which is a good thing, because then you stay close to the customer's project, and you're able to understand more about how there could be more that comes afterwards. The real challenges that I found were, you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with people, and different people get on with different people. And in my early days of selling services, I'd remember going, right, this is an absolute rock star PM. Like, I want that PM on every project.
Right.
And I remember specifically requesting this 1 p.m. for a follow-on customer. And after the project launch workshop, the customer said, "Get that person out of my office." I went, "What?" And they were like, "Yeah, don't like the way we're working. Don't know." I went, "But like this has come off 3 other customers. They absolutely worship this person." And that's the kind of thing. It's when you're selling product, it's bits and bytes. It does something or it doesn't do something. And when you're selling services, it's humans, it's emotions, it's families, it's locations, it's very different experience, but very rewarding in a different way.
Yeah, that's very true. And in the consulting world, there's personality of the consultant and the culture of the place you're going, and sometimes they mesh beautifully and sometimes they don't. I've consulted a long time, and there's places I've gone where John Gorp's an absolute hero, and I should be my picture should be on the wall, and then there's others where John Gorp's an idiot, right? And what the hell is he doing here? He should work at Starbucks. Nothing wrong with working at Starbucks, but
and they can be 3 days apart, or they can be even at the same time. Because
yes, I was like, I did the same thing in this place that I did this one. Why am I great here and I stuck here? I don't know, but that's what makes it interesting. Speaking of interesting, one other interesting thing I saw in the back of your book, and I'll have to read the whole thing, is the statement: how do you deal with competition by empathizing with their point of view? I thought the word empathizing was a really interesting choice and intriguing. You don't have to give away the whole book, but what's that about?
So I think it's really easy, certainly in technology companies, to get into your own bubble. You come in, you get indoctrinated. We're the heroes of the world. We can solve everything. And if customers just bought our product or our service, then they'd be doing much better. But the fact is, there's another girl or another guy doing my job in another company who feels exactly the same way about their own product and their own solution. And then there's another one over there.
Right.
And, I always think about Android and Apple. Now, people have a religious affiliation to one or other of those. I happen to be on the Apple side, and I love it because it's for me, the beautiful union between the hardware and the software and the services, and and I just love it. But then over on the Android side, there's people that absolutely love that for different reasons. They love, the flexibility, the different number of handsets at different price points. They don't want to be locked into a sort of closed garden, and for both people, they can make a very sensible and rational reason for why their product is right for them.
Right.
And I think about that in in technology sales. Customers can make a very good and rational reason for choosing ours, but also for the other side.
Right.
And it's very helpful to spend time to think about it from the customer's perspective and from the competition's perspective. Like, if you were the customer, like, how would you build your case for buying that other product? And if you can reasonably say that, actually, if I was in their shoes, I'd do the same thing, then number one, you might end up qualifying yourself out, because you'd say, well, to be honest, we don't actually do that, and really they should go and speak to this other company. Or you're going to think, right, well, how would I compete against something? Because actually we've got some things that they haven't got, so maybe we can take in this direction. So yeah, I just think it's helpful to think about it from a customer's perspective, think about it from your competition's perspective. And then this all comes into another sort of chapter in the book, which is about dealing with, rejection, which is something that salespeople, have to deal with, constantly through their career, which is, if you really can empathize with the customer's decision, and that if you were in their situation, you'd have done the same thing, actually, you can feel a little bit better about yourself and not beat yourself up about it, because, you'd have done the same thing. And that the customer chose a competitive solution, Android versus Apple, because that was the right thing for them at that time.
Yeah, I imagine that builds a lot of trust too, and you never know if you have a long-term relationship with a client where, next time something comes around, they'll think of you, right? Because
Yeah,
you built
yeah.
this
I mean,
sense of
it's
trust.
either next time or even still this time with boomerang deals, which
Right,
happen a lot. So I always say, the deal's not done when they choose the competition. The deal's not done when they sign with the competition. It's not even done when they start a project or start implementing, because as we talked about, they might not like a project manager. Someone may have oversold something. So
right,
losing gracefully is something that we talk about in the book.
right.
You want to leave the door open.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that touches on is it's something I think about, especially when it comes to negotiation, is like there's the rational and then there's the emotional, right?
Mm.
And sometimes I wonder when a customer purchases something, how much of it is because they sat down with a spreadsheet and did the math and it's the right thing for them, and how much is it an emotional decision and the spreadsheet is just a way to justify the emotion that's
Yeah.
behind it, and in technology a lot of times we almost, you talked about indoctrination, we almost go into like the religious, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not just your Apple person, you have the Apple faith, right?
Mm. I mean, uh, when you talk about spreadsheets and customers filling in and scoring, you're often, in an RFP process, which in the book, I say RFP stands for really futile process,
Yeah,
because it really is. Unless you were the company that helped them to write that RFP, you're not in the hot seat.
yeah,
And the realistic result is that you will not be selected. And that's because, I think it was back in 2013 when the Challenger sale came out and then followed up by the Challenger customer. Um, Customers today have got access to so much information on the internet, on social events. They don't need to speak to a salesperson up front.
right,
10 years ago, they needed to ring you up in order to get you to send out a pack of information to them. But now they can do most of the research themselves. So if you think about a company that spent like 18 months researching for a new accountancy system or a new HR system, by the time they get to doing an RFP, they already know what they want. They're only
yeah,
doing the RFP because their procurement team have told them, we've got to be compliant. We've got to show that we've done our due diligence. So then they pick up 5 other companies and they say, look, here's a spreadsheet. Can you fill it in? No, you can't have a call with us. No, you can't ask us any questions. No, you can't do a POC, because they don't want to spend time with you. We've already made our decision.
right,
So in answer to your question, it is the emotional stuff. Once you get to spreadsheets and the analytical bit, you've already lost, because the emotion is already with another company that they've been speaking with for the
right,
last few years even.
yeah. I filled out many of RFP responses, and it's just painful, especially when you know you're going to lose, right? Which
Yeah,
is it's just
yeah.
very strange, right?
There's another good book. It's quite old now, but it's called Customer Centric Selling.
mm,
And in that, it's got a chapter on RFPs, and it says the worst thing that can happen is for you to win an RFP, because then for another 10 years, people will
yes,
always talk about, but we won this one. We won this
yeah,
one. So you actually
right,
want to not lose anything and let people forget. And then you can just stop responding to them, unless you were the company that defined the content of that RFP.
yeah, yeah. And to some, depending on the industry, sometimes they're required, right? Government and
Yeah.
higher education and things like that. Um, Stepping back a bit, I've known you're kind of an international man. I've seen you in American offices,
Mm.
so I know you've been in the United States. What? How would you describe the differences between British office culture and American office culture?
That's a good question. I mean, I remember when obviously we both worked at Aperio, and that was a very
Mhm.
virtual company. Originally had a lovely office in San Francisco. It was full for 1 week a year for Dreamforce.
Yes.
um, when I joined Aperio here in London, we had a very small kind of box office in Cavendish Square. Only had about 3 or 4 desks, but I would, just as I had done in previous roles, jump on a train, spend an hour and a half, 2 hours to get into London. And I remember Laurie saying, "Why do you people keep coming here?" I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
it's 'cause we're British. We're sort of conditioned to travel because the country's small enough that
Mm.
if you could get there and back in a day, you would do that." But I found that was really, really useful, and especially in my sort of younger days when I was starting work, I really benefited from being in an office.
Mhm.
Of course, back then you had to go to an office because the computer was there, the database was there, the phone was there, so there wasn't any kind of home working. But like the culture of the leaderboards on the wall, the whiteboards, the air horn when a deal was closed, an actual bell that you rang, those
Right.
are the kinds of things when, certainly when you're starting in sales, you can celebrate with your colleagues, but you can also commiserate, and get advice and support if things aren't going your way. And so I definitely recommend, for anyone that is starting in sales, that you have to forget where you live and you have to figure out who you want to work for, and
Yeah.
then go and move there. So that at least you can get in, on a daily basis. And then, when you're maybe a bit more tenured and experienced and got family and things, then remote works a little bit better.
Yeah. So you think the British office culture is slower to take on the virtual office? Is that what you would say?
Um, no, I think we're experiencing a lot of exactly the same in the US at the moment,
Yeah.
with dealing with this, return to the office. I think a lot of it is uh, sort of experience specific. If you're new into a role, then I think it definitely pays to be closer.
Right.
You cannot beat being in a room with 10 teammates
Yeah.
around a desk and winning and losing together. I feel
Yeah.
it's possible to be an SDR or to be a salesperson starting in a new career 100% remote, but I think if you had an option of me sitting here at home, or if there was an office building in my garden, where would I be more successful? I'd be more successful
Right.
working in the company office if it were nearby.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not a simple decision for many people. That office is 2 hours or 3 hours away, and so
Yeah.
therefore, if your sort of life situation allows, then I'd be thinking about moving towards one of those offices for at least for a couple of years before
Right.
you move out again.
Yeah. So, just a personal question, what do you do when you're not working these days?
What do I do when I'm not
Or writing
working?
books?
Well, or writing books. So yeah, the book has taken up a decent amount of time at the weekends, and going to be creating some courses off the back of this, so that will
Mm,
keep things going. But
fantastic.
I like running. I like running a lot. I took this up about 4 years ago. I found it was quite good for stress, and
Yeah.
with 4 kids running around, actually running was the one time when it was just me.
Yeah.
I could relax. I did used to like going for country walks, but it's a joke with my wife. I took up the running because she said you can't be out of the house that long, so you have to come back quicker. So that's why I
Yeah.
started running instead
Right.
of walking. But so that's what I tend to do at the weekends. Go for a quite a decent long trail run in the hills here.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. So your book is How to Sell Tech, a step-by-step guide to hitting your target in your first technology sales role. And you can get it at Amazon, anywhere else. Is that, I don't know, how do people buy books now, right?
Yeah,
We used to have bookstores. We don't anymore.
exactly. Real bookstores, which hopefully it will be in someday soon. But yeah, for right now, Amazon.com is the best place to get it, and it's on Kindle paperback, and there's also a hardback version as well.
All right. Well, Charlie Cowan, it was great seeing you again, my friend. It's been a long time. Um, really excited about this book. It should help a lot of people. It sounds fantastic, and
Yeah.
you're a fantastic person. It's
If
great to
it
hear
was
your
like
story.
magic, we'd be able to like pass it through the screen and you'd have it there, but it's not magic. There you go.
Not yet, right? I think Meta's working on that, right? I could be dressed as a unicorn or something and read it. So that's exciting. I can't, the future looks exciting. All right, Charlie, I'll let you get to your weekend, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir. Take
John.
care.
Good to catch
Bye.
up. Bye.